Hello, greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay updated in 2025, the year of AI agents, then you must listen to this podcast and the YouTube channel. We keep you up to date with all the news and the launches and all the happenings around the AI world, as well as bring our own perspectives on the table. I'm your co host, Shadab Hussain. I'm the Director of Data and AI at Microsoft.
And as always, I'm Jamie Basilico, co-host of the AI Files, along with Shadab. I'm a data and AI technical specialist, architect with Microsoft, and bring over 35 years of expertise in the data-related and AI fields to our discussions. And I've worked with many of the Fortune 500 companies over that time span. Again, as always, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views expressed by myself and Shadab, as well as our guests that we have on from time to time, are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So, again, with that, let's dive in. I know we've got a lot of quick hitting news stories for everyone this week or in this episode. So, I guess, Shadab, you want to kind of start us off with what we're going to be covering?
Yes, the AI quote of the week. So let me start reading this, and Jamie, take a guess who said this, right? Okay, quote. One of the most exciting things we are working on, again using the tools that Sam and Massa are providing, is our cancer vaccine. And that was said by who?
I'm going to go with Ellison. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Because of course, Allison has a huge interest in the healthcare, right? So, and by the way, he's back, right? So with this, he was actually on the scene. He's back. He's not done. He's definitely wants a pie out of AI. And he said this during a news conference with Trump in the Roosevelt room of the White House this week. And Larry Ellison said that the early cancer detection can be provided with a simple blood test. And artificial intelligence can be leveraged to look at the blood test and find the cancers that are seriously threatening someone's health. And then beyond that, once we gene sequence that cancer tumor, you can then vaccinate the person, design a vaccine for every individual person to vaccinate them against the cancer. And then Ellison continued, and you can make that vaccine, that mRNA vaccine. Remember the same technology that was used in the COVID vaccine as well?
Yep.
You can make that robotically again using AI in about 48 hours. That blew me away. And then he said that imagine early cancer detection, the development of a cancer vaccine for your particular cancer aimed at you, and have that vaccine available in 48 hours. This is the promise of AI and the promise of the future. And with that, I was on his side. So that is what actually happened, Jamie. This was the news of the week, the Stargate project.
Yeah, I was going to say that's super huge news with Stargate, and like I said, it kind of bleeds into the two. Do you want to give our listeners a little bit more insight on what Stargate is? What who the players may be, and then I know top of my mind also is what impact does that have with Microsoft and its relationship with some of the players there?
Yeah, absolutely intriguing questions. So, so by the way, this promise of having a personalized vaccine, this is not a new concept. This has been around. The personalized vaccine concept has been around for years, and it has been discussed a lot. But I think there have been challenges, right? Because generally the clinical trial, they just take too long to develop anything, and the vaccines can be even more difficult. So the personalized vaccine has been discussed a lot, but it has been challenging. What AI is doing is actually really accelerating that promise right now, because as Larry Ellison said, that within 48 hours, that's a goal that they're going to target, to have that cancer vaccine available, personalized to you. And that, I think, what else if not cancer as the perfect subject of that vaccine? I think that everybody would love that, and Larry Ellison and OpenAI will become hero if they can do this, right? So this would be amazing. The thing is that it is also not a fantasy, so just on a related note, this week actually, this a team of scientists at the University of Toronto has successfully implemented AI tools to accelerate the discovery of new cancer treatments, reducing the process from years to just a month. And I'm not talking about personalized vaccine here, right? This is just the new cancer treatments. But the process, as I said, right, from years to just a month is amazing. So, yeah, I mean, 48 hours seems pretty reasonable to do that with all these new tools. And all that will be developed through the new infrastructure spending, which Donald Trump has actually, he was part of that announcement, which he actually brought OpenAI and Oracle and SoftBank CEO together to make that announcement. And this was about Stargate Project. So this was essentially a $500 billion joint venture with SoftBank and Oracle, at which is basically to bolster the US AI infrastructure. Now, this new entity will start building out data centers and electricity generation, which is needed for the further development. And this will be done in Texas. The initial investment is expected to be about $100 billion, right? So the initial, that is where it will start, but it can go up to $500 billion, and probably it likely will. In fact, it might even exceed that, right? There are some people are anticipating that this might actually go up to $750 billion. Um, but this is like one of the top announcement, because Donald Trump is also trying to actually bring about $1 trillion investment, like from private firms. So this basically take care of half of that, right? So this is an important one, particularly in the AI, and it is expected to actually generate like hundred thousands of jobs because of a lot of these data centers and the energy generation that all need to be done.
Yeah, and I was gonna. There's so much to unpack in just this one, piece of news, and we could probably spend a whole episode just talking about this. But even what you just mentioned, there's things that we can think about in terms of, well, what does this actually mean? Obviously, on the face value, it's a new startup, it's a venture, with some of the major players like you just mentioned with OpenAI. But I think there's some undercurrent or other themes going on here, and you just hit upon one of them, which is around jobs that would be created. I think there's a whole lot of discussion, certainly today, around, is AI going to take jobs? I personally believe it will. Whether or not it's coders or people that are going to be writing, news articles, agents running around to do that, not part of today's conversation in that. But when you think about jobs that could potentially be taken away by I think the aspect here, especially with Stargate, is, well, if we focus in on infrastructure to support AI, which will run those other processes, well, now we're talking about thousands of jobs, from everything from starting to build up those data centers to the people that will need to run those data centers. And I think, to me, and my personal perspective on this is that, how does the government, coupled with these organizations, help to then spur on that local development, whether it's by county, by state? So I think this is going to help any of the 50 states here in the US around how can you get behind the type of activity that's going to be needed to even run the types of hardware, the types of power that we're going to require to be able to do this AI. So this is certainly an underlining aspect of this Stargate project, and hence why I think it started out from the Trump administration, and wanting to tout this, and being something that came right out of the gate, in his first, what was it, first 48 hours of his presidency.
Yeah, and this is a very clear signal also from President Trump that he's definitely um, like he's very interested in the AI. He wants to do a lot AI and the business investment and things like that. So it was a signature investment from him this week, highlighting that what the message that he wants to give. Now, a quick fun bit, right? I mean, the Stargate, right? Why the name Stargate? And I think we all know, like we all love science fiction. Stargate was actually a name of a movie. I think that came about somewhere in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the funny thing is, I went back to watch some of the Stargate shows. If anyone hasn't seen it and loves science fiction, highly recommend it. There's so many different spin-offs between Stargate Atlantis and a few other ones, but great movie. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I think some of our listeners who may be younger enough, it was a good movie. I liked it. I like science fiction. That's why I think. But it was about actually discovering a device which was then termed the Stargate, and it was like a ring-shaped kind of thing, buried somewhere in the Egypt's pyramids. And then the scientists who discovered that, then they understand this kind of probably open some wormhole, and then they built it, and then that was basically the name of the Stargate. I think it was by the director, I think Roland Emmerich, a good director. Of course, he has done a lot of good stuff. Anyway, before I get drift away too much in the movies, but yeah, so I think this Stargate project. The other important thing is, Jimmy, that the question is that okay, this is OpenAI and the Oracle and the SoftBank. Okay, so where is Microsoft and why there is no Microsoft in it? So just for clarity, there are other partners who will be involved, of course, to build the data center. Remember that, and that would actually include Microsoft, investor MGX, and the chip makers like ARM and Nvidia. And these are initial partners, so there could be more as well. Now that brings the question that okay, so what happens to the partnership between the OpenAI and Microsoft? Is it a like fallout? Is it like a no, not really necessarily. In fact, I would say it's probably a smart move actually. If you think from that point of view, that there has been a like kind of scrutiny, and then about the Microsoft and OpenAI relationship. There have been, I think, lawsuits as well, like it could be anti-competitive and things like that. So I think it's a smart move to actually show that, okay, hey, OpenAI is free to actually do the partnerships other as well. Also, OpenAI actually is not the first time that they are using. They were actually Microsoft did allow them and in fact facilitate. I think that kind of a working between Microsoft, Oracle, and OpenAI because OpenAI has used some of the capacity from Oracle as well. Oracle does have some GPU capacity that was available. Microsoft and Oracle themselves are also actually working pretty closely, right? They did some launches about where you can run the Oracle databases within Azure. Like an Oracle capacity can be used. So, we will not go into those details, but this is not, I would say, a coincidence or out of blue. I think this trio of companies have been working together. The other thing is that, yeah, go ahead, Jimmy. I think you're
Yeah,
saying something.
I mean, there's a whole, like I said, we could unpack this for a whole episode. On the surface, there's the things that certainly were put out by Microsoft, and we'll put the show notes in there. There were 4 different bullet points, everything that reiterating what Microsoft has in conjunction with OpenAI. Things like the revenue sharing between the companies. Microsoft has the rights to the models that OpenAI. Notice how I mentioned the models that OpenAI puts out. We all know that OpenAI runs its models on Azure, and there's an exclusive use right or where OpenAI APIs run, which is on Azure, so it's exclusive to that. But all of those things I just mentioned are Microsoft and OpenAI. Again, I'm no lawyer. I definitely don't profess to be one, but this is starting up a new company called, again, Stargate, where you've got these different players. Now, how does that then relate to the relationship that Microsoft has with OpenAI? Because the relationship is not Microsoft to Stargate. The relationship is Microsoft to OpenAI. And while, yes, I know Microsoft is a player, I guess, at some level within Stargate itself, what I kind of zero in on more is the working relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI in terms of the business agreement. And if everyone doesn't know what I'm alluding to, the business agreement is that once AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is met, whatever your definition or the true definition of what that is, once that's met, the relationship, the business relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI breaks. So in the back of my mind, would Stargate be a mechanism where OpenAI is fully concentrating in with their engineers resources to get to some level of AGI and then bring that back into the OpenAI world, which can help to accelerate or accelerate the breakage between Microsoft and OpenAI. Anyway, a lot of conjecture there. Don't know. And again, like I said, I'm no lawyer and I haven't seen the Microsoft, um, business contracts between the two. But to me, it's the notion of Stargate is going to bring advancements. I mean, at the bottom line, it's about advancements in technology, and it's about spinning up these different compute environments to be able to do those advancements. So, going back to the American people and the things that this will help spur on, no doubt that's actually going to help. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'll get off
And
my
Jamie, very
soapbox
good.
now.
Very good point that you mentioned about the whole partnership thing. What I also feel is that while Satya Nadella and Microsoft, our own company, has actually reiterated clearly that Microsoft has rights to OpenAI IP for use within our products. That we have the exclusivity on our cloud in terms of the OpenAI models can only run on the Azure as a service. Remember, the Stargate is not trying to create a cloud service, right? So it's essentially a infrastructure investment which will allow the new models to be developed. So it is more for the training and research purpose. It is not creating a business entity which will compete with the Azure or the other clouds, right?
So,
So that's
so,
important.
so says people now. Well, we'll see
Yes.
how that might change, but yeah, on paper, that's what it's being touted for.
That is true, and yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, this could become a mechanism or the pathway to actually achieve the AGI. But what I also feel is that I think both Satya and Sam, I think they are pretty savvy businessmen, and they are pretty. The way they have behaved themselves, right, in the public, you don't hear them squabbling or like unlike others, and like taking the shots at each other despite tension. And any partnership will have tension. It's natural to have tensions in the partnership. It happens even in the marriage, right? So it is very very but I think the way they have carried forward this relationship, which Sam Altman at one point of time actually described as the best bromance in the tech world, right? So I feel that they figure things out, right? I mean, the way they have conducted with their partnership, like Microsoft themselves have actually come closer working with Oracle, have come closer working with Snowflake. They also don't take much firing shots. I feel that both Sam and Satya will figure things out. They both the revenue is actually bidirectional. It flows both ways, as Microsoft put out in the statement, and it also remains a major investor. It has a and more important thing, the Microsoft actually has a right of first refusal. So it Microsoft actually allows OpenAI to go and consume other capacity,
Right.
but they do carry the right of the first refusal. So they're still protected that way.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I think that boils down to two. It's like, do we have? Sorry, does Microsoft have enough capacity to run? So if Microsoft doesn't, I think that goes back to that whole right of first refusals clause that says, all right, yeah, go ahead because we can't service you in the first place. So the way I look at it, as long as you've got enough capacity, you could still make business with OpenAI. And I think you might have already mentioned this as well, is that Microsoft is still sinking a lot of money into expanding their own AI-enabled data centers across the world for model training and model inferencing. So it's not like Stargate is the only thing in town where dollars are being spent towards expansion.
yeah, I think approximately $80 billion annually is what Microsoft will spend in building out AI-enabled data centers to train AI models and deploy the cloud applications and AI applications in FY25. So that's a lot of capital investment that's going on in any way.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think that leads really well into the next story is because again, it's not just about Stargate. You just kind of hit upon one thing that Brad Smith, who's the president at Microsoft, and his commentary, as you just mentioned, was that Microsoft spends $80 billion annually on what they put forth on their data centers, and that's actually what's going to be spent in this current fiscal year, which runs through July or June 30th. But it's not just about Microsoft. It's not just about OpenAI and this whole Stargate project. Uh, not to be left undone, but Mark Zuckerberg also announced that Meta platforms will be putting forth a large amount of capital this year to expand, artificial intelligence and driving new data centers, and that's got a price tag. Again, we keep on throwing out billions of dollars like it's nothing, but 60 billion to 65 billion dollars worth of new capital, and also just announced, just on the heels of that announcement, that a 4 million square foot data center in Louisiana last month, is the latest one, and I think that had a price tag of about $10 billion to it. So there's no slowdown, whether or not we're talking about Meta, or we're talking about Microsoft for that matter, with its 80 billion, and the big kid in town, which is Stargate, with its $500 billion tag. By the way, slight little commentary on Stargate. Since it was announced, and it seems like things are just rapid fire, but at the time of this recording, it's less than a week since Stargate was announced. Already hearing some rumblings, and like I said, we can go through a whole backstory, but there's a lot of history between the different players, whether it's we're talking about OpenAI, and with Sam, but there's some blood, I'll just put it that way, between different fractions. So like Elon Musk. So there's been even some back and forth on, do those players like OpenAI, SoftBank actually have the capital that was outlined for this 500 billion? So it's obviously going to come in phases, but I think some of the initial ones were, the initial contribution, it's not 500 billion, but it's 10 billion from SoftBank, or 15 billion, again, just throwing around billions here. OpenAI might be 10. So starting out small, at least for the initial wave of what would be built inside of Stargate. So going back to my commentary that Meta's putting out 65 billion, or at least announcements on it. Microsoft is, as I mentioned before, Elon Musk is in this mix as well, because he said he just built a data center in a few months in Memphis, Tennessee, and has also plans for increasing that compute capacity. Again, drum roll, 1 million GPUs. In the back of my head, who's making out of all this? It's NVIDIA. So again, not making stock predictions here, but if everyone's building out new data centers with new GPUs, inevitably it's going to be NVIDIA that's going to profit and do well from all this.
Yeah, first of all, the millions and billions of figures are so casually actually thrown nowadays that I wish I could, you know, negotiate my compensation at that. Use those figures there. But anyway, the other thing is Jensen Huang, right? I mean, this guy is like chill, right? I mean, he doesn't care. Okay, you guys can fight it out and
Yeah,
decide who wants what.
love,
I will
love
provide
raking
that.
the money.
It's amazing, right? What a business he is, and that's I think the important thing is this, right? I mean, and there was some funny exchange happened that as soon as this announcement came, Elon Musk was not happy as usual, and he said they don't even have the money. Right? So he actually tweeted out, "I have got good authority. They have only $10 million." But that's not how it works, right? I mean, you don't need to show that entire thing. It's all the way it is done. It is done in increment, and it is using the line of credit and things like that. So I think that doesn't seem like a concern at all. Um, but I think the important thing is that, okay, while all this is going on, what is going on in the polity, right? How the political landscape is also changing. So let's talk about that also, Jamie. Now, let's talk about the AI. How was it discussed in another of the important forum every year, which is World Economic Forum in Davos, right? Um, and there was some lot of discussions happened there, which of course a lot of them, like AI, was really talk of the town. And some of the discussions were around, for example, there was a discussion about where Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, he's talking about, okay, can AI be considered a basic human right, right? So that remains a debate. I don't know the answer to that. I don't even have the opinion right now whether it's can be considered a basic human right, because it's a whole different realm. So but those things were discussed, and then he also talked about that, okay, all these rapid advancements in AI have led to the concerns about the fear of becoming obsolete, right? For new term, prompting companies to focus on upskilling employees to handle AI technology. So a lot of discussion that happened. Even Pope Francis actually chipped in, and like he talked about at the forum that he expressed concern that AI could create really a crisis of truth, because it can produce deep fakes, it can produce a content which really looks like so real, and credible. So he's talking about the crisis of truth, and then there are some other leaders like some CTO of Poolside. He talks about he brought an interesting point. He said that we have never seen in the history that basically the instances of jobs of the people who are the highest earners being displaced, right? It generally, new technologies generally have impacted the lower end of the society, right, in terms of automating their tasks. But this is the first time where actually AI could become a technology which could actually impact highest paid jobs as well.
Yeah, I look at AI as coming after white collar jobs first. And who knows where things will happen with robotics later on. I mean, we're already seeing some of that obviously now, but I agree with you. The first wave of AI is going to take a higher social economic class of people that are doing different types of work. So
Yeah, no wonder it's something different. What else went down? I'm sure that the other entities did not sit quiet, Jamie, in the world.
yeah, definitely not. I mean, kind of going back to, and by the way, I look at Davos, obviously a lot of rich people around the world get together and a lot of, strategic thinkers. And obviously we had the Pope this year. But it's all about coming together and then providing insights and thoughts on where things might go in the future. Right. So again, as you kind of alluded to, that's not the only thing that's out there in the world. We've had an interesting prediction, might be the best way of saying it, by Anthropic CEO, that's Dario Amode. He actually predicted that AI models may surpass human capabilities in just about everything in 2 to 3 years, and that was in a recent interview. That's that's very interesting. I mean, there's been some bold predictions, and again, when we talk about where these models would surpass the human, we're talking about that artificial general intelligence ultimately getting to super intelligence at some point, or surpassing humans. But if he's predicting, and again, Anthropic, they're at the forefront of these foundational models and things that they're actually building. That's pretty short window. It aligns with my thinking, by the way. I think we'll definitely be there within 5 years or less. But he's even Dario, that is putting it way before that. 50% less, maybe somewhere between 2 years. Um, Now, what's also important, when he made that prediction, almost in the same breath, he really focused on the fact that, we as a society need to actually stress the fact that there needs to be policies and actions to mitigate the risk that comes along with the ability for these models to be, you know, on par with anything that a human can do. And in order to do, it's all about policy again. I think we've seen a pretty broad swath of policy changes this year, and I think we'll be talking about that in a minute or two. But bottom line, he stressed the need for policy actions and change. The other thing too, and again, it kind of dovetails on what we were just talking about. Also, one of the things that he stressed was, you know, updates to the infrastructure, not so much about just building the data centers, but how are we in order to put up all these data centers, we also need energy infrastructure to change as well, and that could be new forms of energy, but then also ways that we think about co-locating energy next to these different data centers, which again, there's been a lot of rules and regulation. Some of it's policy driven around what it means for our ecology and the way that our human system interacts with the Earth system. But the other side of that as well, there's been some, how do I say this? There's been some internal fighting from our energy companies not to allow some of that. Again, when you think about, does it cut out the middleman? So a lot of politics and, a lot that goes on with how you drive energy and the things that you need to do to build these various different energy plants and data centers. So anyway, that was one of the, predictions. Again, it's not just about what's going on in Davos, but we've got other people chiming in as well. While we're on Anthropic, one of the other things that came out this week is, we're talking about investing in Stargate infrastructure. Well, we actually had an investment by Google where they're going to make a fresh investment into Anthropic. And if people don't remember, Google actually already put in $2 billion into Anthropic. They own 10% of Anthropic as a startup. And they've obviously got other contracts with Anthropic around use of the cloud. So this new $1 billion just adds to that investment. So basically, it's a 50% increase in what they already have. So Anthropic is also in some other final negotiations to raise additional funding. That's through Lightspeed Venture Partners. And, the bottom line is all of these companies, we're talking about valuations now, that, 50 billion, 100 billion, 200 billion dollars. That's where they're getting these large additional stages to raise money. And then, like I just mentioned, other than the 1 billion from Google, this Lightspeed Venture with a valuation of 60 billion, raise an additional 2 million on top of that. So lots of money thrown around. Hopefully we can get a few of those dollars somewhere to help our own pockets.
That's an important news, actually, Jamie, because Google's investment in Anthropic is very interesting, right? Amazon has also invested in Anthropic, and it kind of makes sense. Amazon was actually suddenly out of place, and they did not have any models which were like really firing, and they needed something, right? Partnership like OpenAI kind of partnership. They did not get the exclusive partnership, but they got a partnership with Anthropic, which was shared with Google. But it allowed Amazon to provide those models, right? To be honest, Amazon, their own models were not really firing, right? Nobody was really using. So they got back in the race with that partnership. So it worked really well for them. Now, with Google, however, it is very interesting because Google has models like Gemini models, which are pretty decent, and they are like in the top three kind of models if you include OpenAI and Anthropic and Google in the top three providers of the model. So for them, it's an interesting partnership because they are in the Vertex, which is Google's AI services platform. They are providing Gemini as well as the Claude models, right? So how their own field and the commercial organizations position that in front of customer must be interesting, right? Because they do have, which one way it is good for the customer, they get the access to both of the top models, but the other hand that it also can be sometimes confusing and conflicting, right? How do you position which model for what, right? There would be an internal preference, I think, towards the Gemini. So it kind of created a little bit of the gray area, I would say,
Yep.
from Google. And it's surprising that Google is going to continue to invest and Anthropic will continue to accept that investment, because I do see there is a business conflict out there, actually.
Yeah, and it's, I look at it as it's not just about the models. At least this is the world according to Jamie, and where these investments come in. Yeah, when Google first started giving investment funds into Anthropic, were they as far as where they are today with Gemini? Certainly not. But there's other things that Anthropic is actually pushing the development on, and that's things like their computer use, which is around agents, a different way of actually looking at it. They've got some things that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So there may be other aspects that Google is thinking about, maybe as more of a let's leverage the research arm of what Anthropic is doing to then bring back into their tools. Again, just some conjecture and some thoughts that I have on why they may still be investing.
Mm, makes sense. Okay, some more news from the politics. President Donald Trump, he has signed an executive order to foster AI innovation free from ideological biases. The directive actually overturns policies from President Joe Biden's 2023 AI executive order, which were deemed barriers to AI advancement as per the new administration. And if you remember, 2023 executive orders were around actually establishing the guardrails. It fell a little bit short of, I think, creating a complete regulation, but it created guidelines and guardrails. And there was some, I think, AI Safety Institute and things like that were created, and it involved OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and Microsoft and Meta, I believe, as well, to like create safe model, right? So there were some guidelines, which means that the model providers would actually work with the government agencies as well in providing some of the safety benchmarks and things like that, just to make sure that these are safe. I think these were all part of the initiatives that were taken under President Joe Biden, right, in terms of the
Yeah.
AI safety.
Yeah, it was widely felt that the the pieces that aligned with businesses that were developing these foundational models, it was too stifling, that it would stop innovation, and that's where certainly the critics of the previous executive orders or policies that were there during the Biden administration, again, that was some of the opposition it was running into. Just so that everyone's clear, the policy that was in with the last regime here in the United States actually had two different parts, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. There was the initial aspect, which required all government agencies to report back on how they were using AI, what their plans were, and from my understanding, that's mostly been completed. It was the policy part that aligned with companies to again report back, um, you know, uh, provide evaluation. What are they doing with their models and weights? That really had not gone too far just yet. So again, the things that I've been reading, it's not like the previous policy really stifled any innovation because it really hadn't been required just yet. So the overturning it really didn't stop the internal government parts that need to report back because that's already been completed, and it really didn't stop innovation because stuff hadn't been put in place yet. Um, anyway,
Yeah,
that's my interpretation of the things that I had seen.
that is true. I think different administrations, of course, they will bring their own spin on things and the way they want to do it. It could be different pace, it could be different areas, it could be different ways. But yeah, I mean, I think given the progress so far, I don't think that those policies, unlike in the Europe world, right, where things were getting slowed and a lot of concerns about the regulations and things like that, I don't think that the US was suffering from any prohibitions in terms of arresting the speed of the development. So I think we did well so far. In fact, but there's another country which was also actually catching up really rapidly. That was China, and we'll talk about that. But I think that there is something happened in the last 1 week. Some new models, etc., that came out that really raised the concerns, the kind of sophistication, right? But before we move on to that, just in another thing is that like the AI use, right? So AI use in the journalism, in the media industry, etc., as well. On that part, I would say that there's a screenwriter, Paul Schrader, and he's actually acclaimed screenwriter of films like Taxi Driver, a great movie. He has expressed his admiration of AI's capabilities in screenwriting, and he says that specifically ChatGPT is smarter and more efficient than himself and other Oscar nominated writers. He says that he tested AI by submitting a script for feedback and received highly satisfactory notes in seconds. And he asked for like film ideas in the styles of various renowned directors, and all of which were innovative and well developed. So he basically is endorsing that, okay, there is a lot to gain here. Of course, that would create a lot of concerns about that. Okay, if you can do things which happen in months, in hours, and minutes, then what's the use of humans? But I don't think that look, I mean, AI reflects what it has seen, which means that what humans have already produced. um it just does so well, it just does so fast, right? And without missing the point. That's the beauty. It doesn't mean that AI can always create something totally new which has not happened before, which I believe is only the capability a human has so far. So we'll see how the AI
Uh,
evolves.
yeah,
Of course, AGI can change that, but
I,
we'll see about that.
I was going to say I differ a little bit from that viewpoint. I mean, with the raising the models and the things that we've already seen today, I think we'll surpass for what can be developed by humans today. Um, but we'll see. Well,
Yeah,
we'll come back to
we'll
that
wait.
conversation. We'll play this clip in 3 years from now and see and see
Maybe the episode
which
number
side.
150, we will
100
talk
something
about
again.
that again.
Yeah. Well, maybe we have to do a prediction show and say where we predict things are going to be for the next year or two. That's a
Correct.
good idea.
And by the way, that also, of course, raised some concerns over the AI use in journalism, because what happened was that there was actually some kind of a strike actually at the Guardian, and then the management actually decided to use the AI to write headlines during that strike. And then this technology, of course, AI was used without a prior consultation, and it kind of has started accusation of hypocrisy and worries about the future role of AI in journalism. So there's a bit of tussle, right, between the workers and the management sometimes. And workers say, okay, we strike, and the management says, okay, we'll use AI. And this kind of, I would say, I expect this will play out a lot. But this is what happened just recently.
Hmm.
Okay. So I think a lot of news, but let's talk about a few launches as well. And Jamie, one of the big launch I would say is from OpenAI. Again, it is the operator agent, and operator agent is again not something entirely new, because Anthropic already showed something called computer use, which was launched last year. And Anthropic has started taking some leads actually. They have started doing things before OpenAI does. So it has become a very interesting battle now. But this operator agent is really basically an AI agent, and it is capable of interacting with the computer, with the screen, with the web browser, and execute tasks such as like filling out forms, booking travels, creating memes, and whatnot. Essentially, it will mimic humans' actions over the computer, right? That is the capability it is targeting to do. Of course, it is not there yet. It essentially it can do things like clicking, typing, scrolling within the browser, and eventually it can even go outside that and do things in the computer as well. But right now, of course, it's just a start. Um, it basically will allow to automate, for example, and the use case could be that, okay, let's say, and they release a video demo as well for this, that okay, here is a grocery list, go and select this thing within the Instacart shopping cart, right? Now it does that. It goes to the Instacart website. It then goes and browse those items, like for example carrots. It will go browse that, and then it will select it and then add it to the shopping cart. Now, I'm talking only about shopping cart because there are other aspects which they are not going to allow right now in terms of the from the safety point of view, like for example checking out, etc. It will not all happen automatically. There are some checks and balances that human has to say yes, human has to say yes to send an email, or to check out, or things like that. That is what, right now, from the safety point of view, it's not that it is not capable of doing that, it can do it all its own.
Yeah,
um,
and I think that's the important part with the way that OpenAI is coming at this with operators, that the human is still needed. Like the quote unquote agent will go off and do things, but right now, like a great example, when you're talking about shopping cart, if you need to do your credit card, it's not automatically just going to like put in your credit card info. You need to, interact with that environment to be able to finish that transaction, or even if it was something else, unless you gave an example here, that agent the ability to do substitutions, it's still going to ask you, oh, I found something that was similar, but what you asked for is not there. Do you want this one? So you have sort of like these halt sequences within what the agent's going to do or what the operator's going to do to get your feedback back before it goes on, and or to close that quote unquote financial transaction. But anyway, go
Exactly.
ahead.
Exactly. Good point, Jamie. That yeah, I mean, it is like it is being defined as a limitation on task. It also requires some user confirmations before submitting an order or sending an email. It also has something called watch mode, right? So it's like okay, that for certain particularly sensitive websites or the emails or things like that, which could be dangerous activities, right, from impact point of view. It does require a watch mode, things like that, right? So you can have it's like that autonomous driving where the driver is there sitting watching, etc., and then steps in if something goes wrong, or the autopilot itself will actually prompt the driver to take charge, right, where it feels that okay, something is potentially dangerous there. So that kind of model, and this whole new world, right, of this is now being like OpenAI is calling as computer using agent, CUA. And
Kua. They
they have
call it,
like
yeah, they call
Kua.
it Kua.
Kua. Yeah, like Kua, I think. So this Kua essentially is it can actually, it is, by the way, it is trained to refuse many harmful tasks, okay, or illegal or regulated activities. So it's like they understand that the implication of this, so they're trying to make sure that it's safe. It has a block list. For example, the operator cannot access websites that are blocked, or like many gambling sites or adult entertainment and drug or gun retailers. There is some moderation also, like automated safety checks, and that there are areas where it has inbuilt safety. But the thing is that this KUA, or the operator that they have released, it they've actually developed like new benchmarks out there, right, to measure this kind of capability. There are some benchmarks like OS World and the Web Arena and the Web Voyager, things like that. It actually measures the capability of these computer using agents, and they release that, and they say that it is still like in some of the parameters like OS World it's just 38.1%. Human sits at high as like 72.4% on that benchmark, but it is getting there. It's still research. Remember, this is not
Yeah,
for commercial use.
and I
It
was
is still research.
yeah, and I was just going to say it is research. Same thing with Anthropic and their computer use. It's still in its early stages. Will it get better? Sure, definitely. I mean, that's hands down. And if you think about what we have today, I know we're not showing any demos. We'll probably cut a small, little, quick episode just on doing demos and giving some insights on what was shown with Operator. But it's pretty darn good for what was shown with what I'll call like a release one, or not even release one, like O1 of Operator. So I think even though it's a research project, it's pretty good, and maybe by the end of this year we'll have something that's even more baked. I
That
do
is
want to make a statement, and this is going to probably sound really odd around Operator. So Operator is not only a play on agents, but Operator is also a play on infrastructure. And you might be perplexed and like, why is Operator infrastructure? If you look underneath the covers and the way that Operator actually operates, vastly different than the computer use from Anthropic. And what I mean by that, if you've tried anything with computer use, it takes over your machine. With Operator, it does not do that. It actually spins up a virtual machine where all of the actions that are happening on that web browser that Operator is doing, it actually occurs on that virtual machine. So what does that mean? Number one, there's more infrastructure that's required because now individual virtual machines are being spun up. Oh, and by the way, you can have more than one operator acting at a time, which is interesting in of itself because now I can have multiple operators, think multi-agent doing some work, right? But what that also means underneath the covers is that your computer doesn't get bogged down by what operator is doing. So you could actually work simultaneously. If I start an operator action, I could do something else while I do that. So you're multitasking in and of yourself between that operator, agent, and whatever you're doing. So, like I said, this is underneath the covers, and I don't think I haven't heard too many people, maybe one, talk about the infrastructure play on this, because you're going to need a whole lot more compute to do the way that operator is operating.
That is true. I think that's a good point, Jamie. Isn't it that the Anthropic computer use only, I think, is limited to just the browser part of the computer? It doesn't do things at the OS level, but this
Correct.
operator does, right?
And it's your browser. So
Hmm.
it's like whatever, like you can't use your computer while it's going. Well, the Anthropic computer use is doing its thing. So this is, with OpenAI's operator, it's, I call it detached. It actually runs in its own
It's
virtual
kind of
environment.
containerizing its own
Correct.
environment where it will
Yep.
operate there, right? So bring some and why is that? I think the reason for that is because there could be concerns around like prompt injection kind of attacks, etc. So they have to build actually some safety measures on that as well, because remember there are some websites who can try to take advantage of it, right? Because this could be potential safety hazard, right? For example, you go to a website and which kind of, let's say, detects that, okay, I mean, it's hard to detect, but still it can actually have the measures to inject the prompt, harmful injection of the prompt, which can also even take control of your machine, right? So those safety measures also OpenAI has talked about how it is actually working to prevent those kind of actions. And within this virtual machine, I think it allows that containerization, so it actually is helpful and protect that machine as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's my understanding as well. The one thing that we didn't talk about yet is how people actually are gonna get operator. So the good news, or maybe bad news, depending on what your viewpoint is that operator is, at least as of today, which is January 26th. Operator is only available to those people that pay the $200 a month pro plan. So you can see what I'm sharing the site. By the way, you just go to operator.chatgpt.com, and that's where you pick up operator. But you need the pro plan itself, which again is $200 a month. So I did not sink my $200 a month in, so I haven't been able to use it directly myself. But um, just wanted to point that out. If you were like, oh, this sounds great, let me go try it. Unless you've got the $200 pro plan, you won't be able to just yet. Um, Obviously, it takes a lot of resourcing, hence why I talked about the need for infrastructure that's going to be required by operator.
By the way, that pro plan has been actually pretty, looks like, like heavily used, Jamie. Sam Altman has talked about that people are using it so much more that we did not anticipate. We are actually burning through the cash probably there, right? Even $200, like 10 times more than the plus, people are actually using it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the pro. Maybe we could do a breakdown one day on really what's in the pro plan. But one of the biggest things outside of operator is you've got more compute to run with Sora, so you could build more
Extended,
with
yeah.
video, right? And then the other thing too is you got the more capable O1 model, and I'm assuming O3 is going to be shortly. That's going to be released to people. So those that are really doing high level reasoning, that's certainly where the pro plan's coming in. So now you've got another check mark on why the $200 a month. Which, yes, I have been thinking about getting it. I'm just trying to justify it in my head. But anyway,
You'll find a way, Jamie. I'm
yeah,
sure you can't resist for too long.
no, probably not.
Okay, so that was operator. What else?
Um, yeah. So outside of operator, so I don't know. We've talked about this in glancing, but not at what I would say any deep level, and we certainly haven't dedicated time to it. But there are some pretty capable models coming out of China. So there's a company called DeepSeek. They've got um, they actually have models for just the regular transformer, and those models actually rival, take your pick, OpenAI. models from Gemini. So that's been out there for a little while. What's been fairly new is their reasoning models. So they had something called DeepSeek R10, which was their first iteration at building a reasoning model. And again, when I talk about reasoning models, these are not your GPT class things. This equates more to like the OpenAI O1 model. So this Chinese company DeepSeek created this R10, their first iteration. It wasn't bad, but it actually had some deficiencies in that model. There was actually um, they had issues with language mixing and coherence. It would literally go back and forth between Chinese and English. Obviously, not something good if you don't read Chinese. But that DeepSeek R1 model, it actually had no supervised fine tuning within it. So it meant the model lacked the ability to refine or fully polish the outputs that you would want with a human. So basically, these deficiencies, DeepSeek went back and said, all right, well, how can we make the R1 model better? And that's exactly what they did. So what they just released was R1. So it's not, they dropped the zero tag. What they did was two things. One, to look at doing they incorporated actually a cold fine start tuning phase. So this actually helps with that reinforcement learning, and then also a multi-stage training pipeline to build this new R1 model. So the other thing too is that when you look at what the R1 model is, it's actually a MOE or a mixture of experts. So they actually have smaller models that feed into this overarching model. So when you look underneath the covers, again, it's using models like Quen and also the Llama models to make this one. So where this actually shines, as I said before, it's putting out numbers that rival what the OpenAI O1 model is. So it excels in things like reasoning, math, and coding tasks. And the other thing too is it's open sourced with an MIT license. So when we talk about some of the differences between the OpenAI O1 model and soon to be O3 model, comparing that against this as far as the openness, and this just underscores the ability for China to really make some major inroads on what it's able to produce as far as these models. And again, I don't think this is getting enough press for many different reasons. One, where is China outperforming us? This might come back to some of the things that we're talking about before with innovation and some of the policies, but they're pumping out some pretty good models that rival the class of models that we have from OpenAI, from Google, from Anthropic, and the like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really has spooked actually a lot of people because this kind of like really put those models, they are really performing at par or even exceeding actually the models that we have today, and which is okay because even a month is a long time when it comes to the AI. So of course, these models that GPT-4 or models, etc., they've been like what, 9 months old, or even like GPT-4 itself incredibly, actually it's almost now 2 years, Jamie, it has been around,
Yep.
right? So like, of course, I mean, we expect the new companies to beat those models, but it just the pace at which the Chinese companies have caught up, that is actually spooking, particularly the politicians and people who are more on the security side of things, and security hawks, etc. So, and this is despite, remember, this is despite some of the restrictions that has been placed in the chips, right? So Nvidia is not allowed to sell the latest chips. They actually dumb down some of those chips. So that is what is really spooking. So what is the Chinese companies are using in terms of the hardware, and also
Right.
they have shown a lot of innovation in terms of the techniques, because this model has not taken billions, right? This is what I think, 4 billion, 4 million, $6 million investment, I believe,
Yeah.
to create this. That is what is like amazing part of it.
Right, and I didn't get into the text specifics, but the number of parameters that this was trained on is far less than even what GPT-4 is. So, to your point, like these companies in China actually using for the underlying hardware and the algorithms that are being used. And I'm showing here, and everyone can see it, like their comparison. And again, these are numbers that DeepSeek put out, but in a lot of these benchmarks, at least half of them, they're beating the OpenAI O1 model with this DeepSeek R1 model. So yeah, it's, I don't know whether or not you're on the side of concerning or, oh, wow, this is great because it's going to stir on more innovation across the companies. But, you know, again, as an open source model, I don't know if I'm going
Yeah.
to use this open source model from China, but, it seems to be a very capable reasoning model. Um, and we'll
Yan, Ye-
see where it
Yan
goes.
LeCun at Meta has already declared it a victory of open source models over the closed ones.
Yeah.
So he says that this is just a testimony of how the open source models are actually beating the closed ones, and and he has taken a credit of because of a lot of innovation from Meta, etc. So we'll see. But I think I agree on a part that I think the open source models, which itself is actually controversial sometimes. Because as per the open source institute, there is no open source. They don't classify meta models also actually truly open source.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but I think it's just right. I mean, it's just a testimony of the I think this also highlights another point, that the restrictions and regulations don't always work. There are always companies and countries who has the capability to work around. For other companies and countries, it may be backbreaking, but countries like China, I think the companies there, they are able to figure things out.
Yeah. I agree. So, rounding us out, one last topic today. We talked about models in that case um, from DeepSeek. Not to be outdone, we have other companies adding capabilities and features, and we talked about Anthropic a few times already, um, either in passing. But Anthropic actually did put out or launch something new called Citations, and this is a new API feature, which, by the way, is only available in the Claude 3.5 model, specifically Sonnet New and the Claude 3.5 Haiku. But basically, this feature helps to analyze source documents, breaks those down, and passes them into the model along with context and along with the underlining query. And this reduces the need for complex prompt engineering. It provides trust. There's also improved performance, up to 15% compared to custom implementations that do citations through prompting and code. So, there's certain areas where Anthropic says, the use of citations is great for. It's great for document summarization. It helps generate concise summaries and the key points based upon what was there in the original sources. Great for complex Q&A. Being able to provide detailed answers based upon whatever references are cited within the specific documents. And it's great also for customer support. Again, think about answering complex questions where it's got to cite multiple sources and what it was used. A great example there is, product manuals or FAQs based upon, either some product or service. There are some things here that, it's certainly advantageous. One, this does not require additional file storage, and it also integrates with their existing messages API. And there's been some scores already that by the use of these citation or the citation API reduces hallucinations, which is super important, and helps with formatting issues as well. So these are things that are certainly going to be advantageous for those organizations that use these Claude models already, or at least the newest ones that can take advantage of this. So the other thing too is that it does just align with the typical token based pricing model, and there's no charge for these output tokens that return the quoted text. So theoretically, this actually might reduce some cost by using the citations. So again, something new and interesting that came from Anthropic just this past week.
So Jimmy, let's say if a company is using just the Azure OpenAI models, how can they achieve the similar functionality, right? I mean, let's say if they are not using the chat GPT itself, but the APIs, are they not able to get the
Well, no,
citations?
yeah, you could do citations. So citations come out and you have to do it through code. I mean, there's a great GitHub repro that shows how you can incorporate citations that are coming out um, from your underlying source. So if you've used the playground within what used to be called Azure AI Studio, now the Foundry Studio, that automatically provides citations when you're doing the quote unquote playground to chat on your data. But underneath that UI, underneath that playground, there's actually prompt coding that's being done to pick up a document that's used. So the whole notion of the citation, you don't actually have to do that quote unquote prompt interaction with your underlying data source and manage all that. It's being done for you by the model. So to answer your question, yeah, you certainly can do it. I've personally have coded things not only within Python, but you can interact with that as well and pull out citations through like Copilot Studio if you're building your own Copilot. So certainly can be done, but that's the catch is you actually have to code for that. So the real advantageous aspect of these citations is you don't have to worry about that. It's being done for you by the underlying API within Claude.
It's just a feature in the API. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm sure that not far behind from OpenAI also they will try to match this
Yeah,
functionality.
it kind of feels like leapfrog every once in a while. So, maybe 2 months from now, we'll be talking about a similar feature from OpenAI or from Gemini or, fill in the blank.
Yep, they will call it quotations maybe. I
Yeah,
don't know, or references, something like that.
something like
Okay,
that.
great. I think that pretty much kind of wraps up the week. Again,
Yeah,
full of action.
yeah, definitely. A lot of things here in this week, and I'm sure next week will be the same as well. So, welcome to the world of 2025 and pushing AI.
Yep. And until then, everybody have a great week and we'll talk soon next weekend. Bye, Jimmy.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.